and we're gonna plan, and it's like, hey, we just got legislative maps on Monday. I don't know if we're gonna do it. I need this time to plan. I can't do it.
Yeah, but it's a pretty special place in the Great Lakes, but for
It's
the.
like,
we should
You
go
guys,
there.
we're gonna be starting any second.
Are we good to start, Melissa?
So one of these.
I could like do a whole presentation.
All right, we're gonna call this to order here, 5 o'clock. Hopefully everybody's checked into Civic Clerk. We'll go to roll call here. Chair Seth, I am here.
Recording in progress.
Whoops.
You wanna start over?
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Item A, Zoom meeting information check. B, roll call. I am here, Vice Chair Ned Dorff,
Present.
Alder Mark Stoyer,
I am here.
Jenny Brinker,
Present.
Amy Cox,
Here.
Krista Kainanen,
Here.
Corey Mim,
Present.
Julia Nordyke,
Present.
and Mark Walter.
Present.
All right, moving on to approval of the agenda for today's meeting, February 21st. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Alder Stoyer. Is there a second?
Well, I'll second.
Mark 1, Mark 2.
Yeah. that's-
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That is approved. Move on to approval of the minutes from our last meeting, January 17th. Is there a motion to approve?
Yes.
All right, motion by Krista. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jenny. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. All right, and that passes. We are going to move on then to regular business. I think we have Dan here from Parks to talk about the Green Bay pesticide use policy for management of city-owned land. So,
Yes.
kicking it to you.
Yeah, I'll just
Join
come
us
to
at
the
table.
table, that might be easier for everyone to see me.
Excellent, thanks for coming tonight.
So yeah, this policy, we've been discussing it for quite a while, well over a year. I believe it's been to this committee before as a discussion. And the direction that we were given is to create a policy that is a city-wide policy on all city-owned land. So this would be all departments affiliated with the city of Green Bay would have to follow this policy on all city-owned land. And this is in relation to herbicides and pesticide use on public lands. So just to reiterate it, this is not really necessary, this is not for the general public to follow. This is an internal document for city staff to follow. So I want that to be clear first of all. So what we created was a policy that accomplishes several goals. So one is it's manageable. So with the staffing levels we have, we can manage this policy as is currently written. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we wanted to make sure that the policy met all laws and rules and regulations as it relates to pesticide and herbicide applications. So we made sure that we cited all of the relevant documentation. We're ensuring that all staff members that are applying herbicides and pesticides are adequately trained, and it's spelled out how to do that. So we're just very careful that if we're going to apply it, it's done properly and it's done to the specifications from the manufacturers and it's per state law and all best practices. The third thing we tried to do is to encourage staff to find alternate means and methods to do other methods other than the traditional methods. So instead of going out and spraying Roundup in all situations, we have items in here where, yeah, that makes sense in some situations, but in other situations, let's try it a different way. So it encourages staff to find those other ways and try them, but it doesn't mandate or lock city staff into doing that in all situations. So Maria spent a lot of time drafting this policy. She worked very closely with all of the department directors and all of the relevant staff throughout the city departments that deal with herbicides and pesticides. She worked with park staff, she worked with forestry staff, so we feel very comfortable with the policy as it's currently outlined. because it accomplishes a lot of things. We've never had a policy to date. I mean, we've always just done it best management, but we never had anything we could point to saying we're doing it best management. Now the public can see that we are doing it, because that was a lot of the questions that came up initially is, well, what are you doing? And after we would sit down and talk to people, they would find out, okay, you are taking some proactive measurements. It'd just be nice to see that. The policy spells it out. The other thing that this policy does, kind of above and beyond what's required by law, is notification to the public. So in my mind, if we're going to apply these chemicals, which we do need to in certain circumstances, to really create the same environment that the public is expecting in our parks and greenways and public spaces, but we really never had a public notification component. So now we do. So where we're spraying in our parks and applying fertilizers and herbicides, we do have a public notification process outlined in here. Well, we will actually post it for 24 hours to let the public know that, hey, we just applied something. It's up to you to decide if you feel comfortable walking through those areas or not. And you can now make that judgment call. Even though everything's safe by all codes, compliances, and laws, everything's done appropriately, there's still some individuals who still choose not to have very minimal interactions with those chemicals, and that's great. This just allows them the notice so that they can make their own informed decisions as we're applying these chemicals. So I guess from there, if you have any specific questions regarding the policy, I think I'd probably direct those specific questions to Maria, since she's been most involved with this and kind of knows the ins and outs.
Are there any questions or comments? Or Maria, would you like to say anything about the plan?
Dan drew it all out. The bulk of this policy is straight from state statute. I would say a good 90%. Again, just outlining those best practices in state statutes and what should be done and what is being done. And then the point to highlight is that notification, because that is above and beyond what is required by state statute that we put in here, because that was the request. So Dan really touched on a lot of it. The other unique part about this policy, which we kind of resembled off of other similar municipality policies, is kind of categorizing the different city-owned properties. So how you manage, city deck is going to be a lot different than how you manage the wildlife sanctuary. There's different management goals, and so this policy is trying to be inclusive of those, paved trails and walkways, as well as turf grass and athletic fields, as well as, the general natural habitat. So each one of those has a very, very different goal of management. So trying to write a policy that encompasses all of them is a challenge, and so we try to address that on that last page with splitting it up into different categories. That gives us general level of maintenance goals that we're looking for, since each of those property types are going to require a different form of maintenance.
And even to expand on what Maria mentioned, so, she mentioned city deck in the wildlife sanctuary. You could also compare it to Bay Beach Amusement Park in the wildlife sanctuary. Mm-hmm. With the amount of tourism and the amount of usage that park gets, it just has to be held to a different standard than the natural areas at the wildlife sanctuary, which is literally right across the street. Mm-hmm. So that's a really good example about how one has a much higher anticipation from the public for how it looks and how people interact with it versus the wildlife sanctuary.
That makes sense.
I had a question.
Ned had his hand up first. I knew Ned's been jumping
At
at
my
the
back,
this.
sorry.
Ned?
Yeah, thank you, Seth. And thank you, Dan and Maria, for all the work that we've been communicating about since it was summer of 2022 when this kind of all got going. So I appreciate the work that's gone into it and the cross-departmental work that Maria, sounds like Maria's been coordinating quite a bit of that. So thank you. I reached out to the constituent, I guess you could say, who first approached me about looking into this non-toxic neighborhood thing, and I shared the draft with him. He said it was an improvement. He liked, kind of the direction that this is going. So positive feedback so far. I like that integrated pest management is mentioned in here, and the breaking it down into different areas, that's really important. The public notice is really important. So I had a question about the notice of application. Let's say that someone is spraying Roundup, in the mulch around a tree at a city park. Will those areas be flagged then for 24 hours? Potentially?
Yeah, so how it's written, Ned, after speaking with the different departments on the public notice, different departments wanted to tackle that in different avenues. So for example, DPW, when they have scheduled applications of stormwater management facilities, they felt it would be easier for them to make an online post and notification, whereas with parks, we're talking about doing it at public access points. So at the parking lots and at trailheads. So if it's along a trail, you would sign at your start and your end point, so like between the signs. At general parks where maybe it is spraying all the different tree rings, that would be posted at the public access point, not necessarily each individual tree, for capacity purposes. Did that
Okay.
answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate it. The other, another factor, and I know we're just getting started with the integrated pest management thing. So I expect over time that this is a living document and it will change possibly with new pest management practices, maybe new regenerative soil practices, whatever it might be. But yeah, I feel very positive about this, so I just wanted to say thank you to those of you that worked really hard on it. I know that I've been not quite harassing you the last 2 years, but certainly, pushing. So I really appreciate it. I'd love to hear Corey's thoughts too, if you. But I'm good. Thank you.
Like we had Alder Story was in the stack next, and then we
All right,
can go to
just real
Corey.
quick. Well, thank you, Dan and Maria, for this. Yeah, I echo Ned on this too. That's a very nice job. I was thinking of some of these invasive species like purple loosestrife, for example. I know they've had efforts where, they have people go out, maybe interns and that, and they physically dig stuff out. And what combination would that come under? Let's say the amount of pesticide versus manual removal of some of this stuff. Did they talk about that much?
Yeah, so I think that would fall under where we mentioned the IPM, the integrated pest management. So one of them is manual removing. So I believe the verbiage is if the non-pesticide restoration practice is more efficient and effective, then it would be valued over the pesticide. So you have to think of staff commitment. So if you only have one staff person, the process of them being able to hand dig a certain area versus applying herbicide. So kind of balancing that and what is the cost for having more staff people if that's the route we want to go. The other thing with your example with purple loosestrife, a big IPM for that species specifically is using the beetle. So there is approved beetle to reduce the spread and impact of purple loosestrife. So that's an approved IPM metric. And that's been shown to be effective and efficient when compared to herbicide use. So that's just an example of that one species.
All right, well, that's good.
And again, we because this had to cross so many management goals and departments. The language is just the IPM, the Integrated Pest Management, and we list a few examples, but obviously not all inclusive. I mean, there's 20-page documents just on IPMs for each individual species, and we're trying to target invasives, noxious weeds, and then weeds that are deemed a weed based on where they're growing. So a dandelion's a weed at Bay Beach, but maybe a dandelion is favorable at the Seymour Edible Garden because they're edible. So maybe it's not deemed a weed in those locations. So trying to think like species-wise and where it's growing is could change. So we tried to just reference established metrics for those things so that we can refer to best management for purple loosestrife or buckthorn or dandelions.
Thank you. Okay, that's good.
Corey, did you have questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. I think it's a great policy. I know a lot of thought has been put into it, across through different departments, which I appreciate. What I think I like the most is knowing that those who are going to be applying the product are going to be trained, and also that the public is going to be informed when we're putting these chemicals, in these public spaces. So I think having that information available to them is going to be a great improvement. So I'm looking forward to that. And also I know internally in the Parks Department, we've talked about, looking at more avenues for the integrated pest management and doing some trials and things like that. So I guess just know we are planning to do that continually and trying to improve, how we're maintaining spaces, but keeping in mind our capacity for being able to do that too. So, and then with the categorizing of these spaces, I think that's very helpful in the public too, understanding kind of how we feel we can manage these spaces and how we feel they should be being presented to the public. So yeah, great start for sure.
Cool. Other questions?
That's all.
All right, Jenny and then Julia.
Okay, I just had a quick question. Are we tracking the nitrogen fertilizer as part of our carbon counting for the city?
We did not do that in our greenhouse gas emissions because that was in a different scope.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we didn't get to that in our initial effort of greenhouse gas emissions. That would be a next step to really get the full picture.
Yeah, I was thinking like if.
But if we're using less, then we definitely want to be.
Set the baseline
Right,
before.
right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, there's the game.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a question?
Thank you for working on this, and I just wanted to say that I think it sounds like there was a lot of good stuff happening already, but I think putting it into a policy for the public, but also just internally is really good because as staff turns over in the future and you have something to go to directly, and it's not a question mark. It's not like, oh, we're doing stuff, So I think it's a really great, it's really good. It's a positive thing. I don't think it's a small thing that this is happening internally. I think it's important to codify those things,
Yeah, and
especially across departments.
Mhm.
I do want to just highlight what Corey had mentioned and kind of what you're mentioning too. So we talked about how the public notice is above and beyond what we're required to do. Our training that we wrote in here is also above and beyond. So being city employees applying herbicide on city property, that makes you a not for hire applicator, and you only need to be certified for the state if you're using restricted use pesticides, which we don't in the city. So we're not required to be certified, but what this is outlining is supervisors would be certified and all other staff would be trained and read that same manual, whether there's funding to send them to the test to get their certification. That's a department decision, but all supervisors would be, even though by state statute we're not required, but offering that training and having those manuals available to all staff is an increase and just a standardizing way to make sure everybody is trained.
Great. Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, question, this is great. Dan? Maria? Yes, I know. I guess the question is, pests don't stop at borders. Have you done any work to reach out to neighboring communities? I work for the county, so I think, countywide sometimes on this. Now's the time to get into the county public works area because Cole Runge is our current public works director, which is great because he's a really very forward-looking person. So, but just curious, De Pere, Howard, Swamico, Ashwaubenon, and all those, is there some effort to integrate or coordinate any of the efforts with the City of Green Bay and those communities?
For like the pesticide use or
Yeah.
just kind of anything?
Pesticide use, yeah.
Pesticide use, not that I'm aware of currently. It's I can speak to the Conservation Corps specifically, because I feel like Conservation Corps is probably the one division in the city that's probably going to be using the herbicide to do more invasive control, kind of to your point about those not seeing borders. And we have been working, sometimes it's project dependent. So East River Trail, we've been removing all the buckthorn, but the East River Trail, we can remove up to the buckthorn up until Alloway's border, and then we have the buckthorn there. So in those capacities, I think it's project based, but currently we didn't reach out or coordinate anything with them for the policy specifically.
Do we know whether any other communities have a similar type of policy?
I can speak to that. When we started this process not quite 2 years ago, that was part of what I was doing, was reaching out to different municipalities on turf management policies, herbicide application policies, different things like that. So we did receive, different levels of that. We heard from Brookfield. I thought we heard from Appleton. There was 4 or 5 different municipalities that I reached out to get theirs. And from those, then Dan started, looking at like the best of what was from each of these policies and creating a skeleton from there, and then we built it out from there. So what I would anticipate that after this gets approved, knock on wood, that we'll have other municipalities reaching back to us saying, how did you do that? And then we can talk about that. So.
Yeah, so the bare bones of this one came from Appleton, correct? Is
Yeah,
the main one.
The main structure of it, but we made quite a few changes.
A lot, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Heather, story, or Christus, sorry.
No, I did, and I was just moving.
I was going to ask about the policy. So is this going to be a document that, there's some tried and true or tested procedures that have worked over time? And I guess I'm wondering, as time goes on, you might find that we might have to tweak this a little bit or look at different ways. I presume it's a living document that way, that it could be upgraded and updated if needed.
It'll have to be updated in order to do it, because it's a formal policy that, the city council will adopt. So you can't, we can change it, but, if it changes considerably, we'd have to run it through again for reapproval to adopt the changes. But like I said, this policy, when you read over the specifics, it's very broad description of a lot of different things. So it gives us the capabilities to not be locked into doing it one specific way. So it encourages us to try alternate means and methods, and it tells us what do we have to do from a training perspective to try these things. And, how do we make sure it's done safely, by looking at the product information. And because if a new product comes out, policy says we have to read that manual on that specific product and make sure that we're applying it to their specifications. So it kind of gives us a lot of flexibility to change things without having to redraft the policy.
Is there a way to look at success of something like this over time? Like the report back and say, what, it's been working 75% well, or I don't know, is there a way to put over time?
I think that can be answered by each department individually. Like Corey mentioned, we've already had some discussions about what we're going to do for the Parks Department, to maybe do various trials. And we'll document how those trials work with different products. And our goal is to try different things in different parks throughout the years and do it on an annual basis and do several different trial plots. But I can't guarantee you that Public Works will do the same, or, you know, police or fire as they're managing their stations, or the transit, or even the RDA-owned properties. So, I mean, there's just a lot of different people working on this. From a park perspective, we probably apply more chemicals than any other department. That's probably why it came to us first. And so, you know, I think if we can take the lead on that, show other departments how we're doing it, maybe that'll carry over into other departments too.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, when reviewing this, we did get feedback from some of the consultants that DPW will contract out for some of their like stormwater management. And really kind of their comments that came back, they're like, we're already kind of doing this, we're already reducing our herbicide use, and we're trying to get a more dense native habitat so that we don't see those weeds and invasives. So they're like, oh, like we're already trying to not use herbicide because truthfully herbicide is quite expensive. So if you can establish more native vegetation and not have to put that money in, it's just better for them in a business aspect too. And kind of more so to that point of that living document, when we outline like, so we've decided like herbicide or pesticide is the way that you have to go for it for a certain species. We outline the specifics of how to apply that in the best way. But like Dan said, in that the very first point of this document is, you know, we're gonna try to consider using non-pesticide means of management first. But if those means of management aren't effective, then we do have to use herbicide, then we outline those specifics. So not mixing or spraying within so many feet of waterways and protecting that sort of thing. So that's written out.
Very good, thank you.
Looks like we got Ned.
Ned, is your hand still up?
I raised it again, thank you.
Okay. I just want to remind that Dan and Corey need to exit by 5:30. So if you have specific questions for Dan, now is the time.
Yep, I was gonna ask Dan and Maria if they were looking to hear feedback from any particular groups or constituencies. I'll be sure to bring this over to like public schools. Folks would be working on this, but you know, are you looking for community garden input? Are you looking for, you mentioned like not spraying dandelions at Seymour Park, for example. Like, do you want groups to share anything with the city as far as what they're looking for in the area that they work at?
You know, I guess, keep in mind the intent of the policy is to direct staff on how to manage city-owned properties. So if other user groups are coming in on city property, we would know well in advance if they're putting chemicals on it. We would either approve it or deny it based on what they're doing. And even if we approved it, there'd be a lot of oversight. So I guess our intention was not to reach out to user groups because this is an internal policy on how city staff is to manage city lands. I don't mind getting additional input from the schools and other user groups of how they want to handle it. I'm more than happy if we want to give this policy to them and they can draft their own policies for their own properties, but I don't know how relevant that would be to get feedback and input from user groups because they're not the ones maintaining our facilities, but that's my only precaution there.
Yeah, and then to add to that, Ned, we did include some verbiage on distance from spraying in food production zones, so those edible forests. So we did include that in here just to address some of our user groups as well. But again, to Dan's point, we needed a policy that was obtainable and manageable by city staff. So that's what we have here.
And keep in mind too that this policy kind of sets minimum standards.
Yes.
So just because it's, like, for example, I don't remember the distance away, but let's say, for example, I think we selected 20 feet to be away from food forests and community gardens as a minimum. That doesn't mean we're gonna stick to that. We'll still reach out to the user group who's ever working on our food forest, and if they tell us, look, we don't want you guys 50 feet, within 50 feet, or we don't want you in the park at all, we'll work with that user group to try to accommodate them. This just sets minimum standards.
I thought that was very thoughtful that you included some mention of those. So I really appreciate the work that you guys have done on that.
Great. Any other questions?
Just a really quick question, comment, that Jenny made me think of, like, I don't know if we're still keeping track of things for the green tier, green tier program, but this
Mhm.
feels like it would qualify in
Mhm.
some kind of,
I do that.
I would think this would
Mhm.
be something to acknowledge
For sure.
and help with that.
Well, I know Dan has to get going at 5:30 here, so thanks for coming and just doing all of this.
If you have additional questions, Maria can stick around. I do have to leave. Just one other comment moving on. I did talk to kind of our city attorney to figure out where we go from here. Her recommendation is, since your committee is an advisory committee only, that if you decide to approve this as is or with suggested changes, your approval would actually be a recommendation to staff and the Protection and Policy Committee for consideration. So just keep that in mind if you get to that point in your meeting. So, other than that, thank you for your time, and Maria can stay as long as you need.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Just a quick comment before you leave. Alder Stoyer will be at the Elder Leopold event, so you have a co-pilot.
So if you need to get a hold of me for something or whatever, let me know, okay?
That sounds great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet.
See you, Corey.
I actually can stay on for about another 5 minutes,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'll plan to do that in case we get to the vote.
Yeah.
But I got 5 more minutes, so
Excellent.
thanks.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, I think we have our course of action for considering recommendation and then referring to the Protection and Policy Committee. So if anybody has questions, Sister, would you like us to open the floor? All right, motion to open the floor by Stoyer, second by Mark 1, Mark 2. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
Just a comment, I just think
Can,
this is
sorry, as a formality, we know who you are, but can you say your name and address too?
Sister Sally Ann Brickner, 3110 Nicolay Drive.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
I think this is exciting. I'm anxious to share it with other people. My question has to do with number 7, general turf management. And it says that the height of mowing would be 3 inches. And it also recommends frequent mowing schedule is preferred. Does this then take into consideration that small engines pollute terribly? So is this factored in with clean energy, clean air, and all that? That's what I was, when I read that, I was a little concerned, and I don't know how you offset. I know that mowing higher is better for the turf and everything, but.
Yeah, so to those points, that wasn't necessarily one of our main focuses for the small engine. But what we to accommodate or address some of those concerns, we really see that in the listings of those categories. So the category A versus B versus C. So our category A, those are athletic fields where we don't want any weeds because that's a safety and a play concern for regulation for sports. Those would get mowed more frequently than, say, the entrance at the wildlife sanctuary, because that has a higher tolerance for those weeds. So that frequent mowing and those setting the mowing height at 3 inches, that's to best help the turf grass get established so that you see less of the crabgrass and less of those weeds popping up, so then you have a reduction in the herbicide use. So that's kind of the thought process that went through there. that general point, because I'm not a turf management specialist by any means, I'm more native and natural areas. So that was, that point specifically was addressed and written by our park superintendent, so the park maintenance staff, as well as DPW staff that manage our right-of-ways, are the ones that set forth those. Really just trying to improve the health of the turf, so you see less of those weeds, so you have a reduction in herbicide, but not necessarily for that small engine pollution.
But maybe what they could do is request that they first of all get the electric vehicles. Because
Yeah, and that's part of that clean energy
Those are some of the
plan.
recommendations in the clean energy plan. So we're not quite there yet to, have all of the equipment in place. But those, those are all part of that plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to close the floor by Mark. Is there a second? Mark 1, Mark 2, but in
Which one?
reverse order.
How does that work?
Hang on a second, I have to close the floor. I'm trying to find the motion. Okay,
I'm gonna
so-
miss this.
Who did the first close the floor?
It was Mark and Mark, and then the next
Mark
one
two,
was Mark and Mark.
So Mark Walter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you want names?
Sawyer had the motion to open,
The younger,
Walter.
more beautiful one. Whichever the one that one is.
Right.
Exactly.
Sawyer first, Walter second to open, reverse to close it.
So we gotta stop.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, all those opposed say no. All right, are you taking off, Corey? All right, thanks. All right. At least she was around for the Mark debacle.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any motions to recommend approval? So
Yes.
by-
I'd move one. I would recommend approving and sending on to staff with the intent that it goes through protection and policy.
All
I
right,
think that's what Dan recommended, right?
Yes, I wrote it down.
I think that's the game plan. All right, we got the motion from Ned. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
By Julia? All right, all those in favor? Oops.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. All right. Well, thank you so much, Maria, for all of your work
Yeah,
on this and
thank
for telling us all about it tonight. This is really
Yeah.
exciting.
I'm gonna sneak out then. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Have a good night. All right, then moving on to informational, we've got the resilience coordinator report. Melissa.
I know, it's silly.
Okay. I put my updates in the agenda packet, but I will read them off, so if you didn't get a chance to review that, I will cover that now. So, a few things. The Aldo Leopold Conservation Fair is this Saturday, February 24th, from 2 to 4:30 at the Brown County Library. Public Works, Stormwater Utility staff will have a table. Next to that table will be the Sustainability Commission table. And Alder Stoyer and Corey Mim will be at that. If you would like to go and help, feel free to, they're gonna be setting up at 12:30 is the setup time. I believe Conservation Corps will also have a table, and then the Wildlife Sanctuary. So there's a good city representation of tables, of people presenting and having tables at event. A public open house for the East River Flood Solutions and recreational master plan for the East River Trail is March 6th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the East High School cafeteria. And the public's invited to attend and learn about the two projects and offer input. So if you can attend that, that would be awesome. I'm exploring a couple of different grant, projects and grant applications right now. One is for an energy innovation grant through the PSC. And that's to do an investment grade energy audit at Fire Station number 4, which is to build off of the recommendations that were made in the Clean Energy Plan. And that is coming due March 1st. So, and then the other grant that we're looking into is a DNR Municipal Flood Control Program grant. I don't know if that one is going to happen, but we're doing everything we can to see if we can get an application submitted for that. And that would be for potential projects in the East River floodway. NOMO May registration will open mid-March, so if you have people asking you about NOMO May, the registration's not open yet. It'll be an online registration. Participation is voluntary, but online registration and posting a yard sign is required for participation. So if you have your yard sign from previous years, please reuse your sign. And the hyperlink to the web page for NOMO May is in the agenda, or in the packet.
Those signs were not recyclable, so hopefully still there.
I think they did.
Yeah, we encourage people to hang on to their signs because they're expensive.
Yeah.
And we are one of the few municipalities that are not charging people for signs. So,
So,
I didn't see you come through the recycling facilities, so that's good.
the residential rain barrel program will be offered again this spring. This will be the 3rd year of the initiative. Online registration is expected to open also in mid-March. Watch the Public Works webpage for registration, and we'll also do posts on Facebook as well to tell people about the program. Really exciting is we have posted for an energy outreach and engagement specialist. That job posting went live last week. It's a limited term employment position. It supports the city's climate goal of 100% clean energy and carbon neutrality. And that person will work on implementing some of the strategies, education strategies from the Clean Energy Plan. The position is limited term, however, it is eligible for full benefits. So if you know of someone who's interested, please either send them to me, give them my information, or they can find the job posting on the city's website under Human Resources and Employment Opportunities. Lastly, I want to say thank you to Jenny Brinker. I just have to mention this because it's so nice. She's helping maintain the city's building and utility data in our Energy Star Portfolio Manager account. This was sort of carryover work that NWTC was helping us with in the past, but it really helps tremendously with meeting the reporting requirements for staying in the Green Tier Legacy Community Program through the DNR. And we're also enrolled in a bonus incentive program from Focus on Energy to be able to keep our buildings up to date. They're not all up to date. The key ones are for some of the buildings that we're eyeing up projects for in the coming years. So those are the ones that she helped us with. So if you're on the commission and you can think of ways, to directly support priority work within, of the priority of the work plan the Sustainability Commission has that helps staff, we welcome that. I also want to mention that Julia plugged the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Revolving Loan Program in a news article that was published by the Press Times last week. Front page.
Oh.
So if you go to the Press Times, you'll see it. Very good. Very good. We are looking for residents that want to take advantage of our low interest loan program to do GSI, please. We want to get at least 2 projects done this year, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
some people.
So that would be wonderful.
They need hand-holding.
Yeah.
Everyone needs hand-holding, so.
Those are the updates I have. Any questions?
Cool, thank you, Melissa.
Okay.
All right, and then moving on then to item 2 under informational, just announcements from commission members. For 2024-2025 commission planning, we have our work plan that we put together in 2022. Presented it to the council in April, right after everybody got sworn in. We want to, after the April election, we have a new council, kind of do the same thing in April or May. Present our work plan. As of tonight, we're able to check another thing off that list, which is really exciting with the pesticide policy. So we have the, Corey had sent along the outreach goals for the year already. So clean energy, the resilience, and then the pesticide, and then the waste use will need updating. So I can send out a template to folks if that would be helpful. And then, yeah, if we're able to consider it in March, that would be great. Love planning. Any other announcements from folks? Julie?
Just really, thank you, because that was a question. I'm really happy to hear that we're going to be updating that. I am on the Comprehensive Planning Advisory Committee. I hope that's what it's called. But anyway, so please, if you have specific things that you would like to see, people who are planners, please let me know as we move forward. And it's going to be like a multi-year process, so
Okay. That
I
was
think
my
it's going to be
question.
over a year, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to put your input in, but, yeah, so,
Cool.
it is cool. That makes a difference.
Is that a
Over
citizen?
long term.
Are you one of the citizens? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
What kind of group, I mean, how many folks are with you?
There's probably 20, at least, of us, and it's a mix, a lot of housing people, and some a university university person, actually, I mean, not a,
Could you send that to us, or, I mean, just, or do we have?
sure. Or
What it's
I don't know,
called, yeah.
how do I,
Yeah.
I can send you,
Sure.
like, on it.
Send it to Melissa, and she can
Melissa.
BCC, or I can send it out too.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
have like
just so
these
we
worksheets,
up,
actually.
then we can
Maybe I can send out the
Shine in.
worksheet, they would like
Mhm.
people to fill out these worksheets,
Oh,
so.
okay.
Is that the one?
With your top goals and barriers
Oh.
for the city.
Does that sound just like for the first time last week or so?
About 2 weeks ago, I would say.
Is Dean?
He was not, no,
That's a day,
no.
must be another one. I
Um,
know he's on one of
No.
the city comprehensive planning committees.
They have someone from the school district or one of the board members, so. It's a, yeah, good, diverse group of people.
Cool.
Anyway,
We'll look
that
forward
is
to that.
exciting.
Thanks,
It
Julie.
is.
That was great.
So, climate resiliency and climate didn't really make this group's priority list, so I could definitely use help in
Yeah.
trying to, because, yeah, so, and getting those things, and doing the clean energy plan, and what things you think should go
I mean,
in
they,
a comp plan.
staff reached out to me months ago when we had our green stormwater infrastructure, the citywide GSI plan approved, and they asked for it specifically for the comprehensive plan. So I would imagine that is being folded in.
Yeah, yes.
When you say this group, you're talking about the group that you're specifically,
Yes,
your citizen group.
yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I think, like, from my perspective, climate is really, it is an environmental justice equity piece for our community, so just trying to think about how to get that into the comp plan, I think, is something that I'm happy to talk with people about if they have good
Mhm.
ideas.
Mhm.
Because,
If you want some, I've been spending a lot of time writing federal grants in the last recent
Okay.
time, and all the federal grants have been writing have a huge environmental justice component.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yes.
required as part of any of that work. And so, I mean, so that could lead into, at the end of the day, you want to be eligible for grant monies at some point or another for projects, let's say infrastructure
yeah,
projects.
that's a
within the
good
city.
approach.
So you could use that as fodder for bringing that forward. But
Yeah, that's really good. Yes, feedback like that would be really appreciated, because I feel like a lot of times our community, there's like a development side and then there's an environmental side, and we really need to bring them
Yep.
together. And so,
like I say, just right now, that's exactly right.
Cool. Great.
I have a little side note on this. I've been impressed to, like pushed to do something. Impressed, anyway.
In bold.
So on February 29th, I've been asked to give a talk at the Wildlife Sanctuary for Founders Day. It's the 170th anniversary of Green Bay. And it'll be on history, basically Green Bay in 1854, but I'm going to look at it not just with the history of the people that were here, old maps, that kind of stuff. We used to do that stuff. But looking at maybe, the Fox River and the environment that was at that time, and I'm gonna try to incorporate some of that, the history back then, and, how things changed late 1890s and the industrial era time, but focusing more on the middle part of the 19th century, a little bit before, a little bit after. So that'll be on the 29th at Wildlife Sanctuary. I think it's gonna be between 4 and 6. They originally wanted to do sled riding, but
Not this
on
year.
Plan B, they wanted a sled, but there's no snow. So,
Neville has an online collection of photography. It starts probably the late 1800s through, well, the Fox River especially, that's
Yeah.
really outstanding.
The Neville,
Yep.
they might have borrowed from that exhibit I worked on years ago. I did an exhibit in 1984, that's a long time. Anyway, that's it, thank you.
Cool. Any other announcements? All right, cool. Well, then moving on to just the last informational update. Our next meeting will be March 20th, which is a Wednesday at 5 p.m. So we'll see you all there. With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn by Ned. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Jenny. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
I
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. All right, adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Has anybody ever said no?
Yeah, 1 second here, I have
Wait a
another
second.
thing.
Screensaver.
Gonna filibuster.
Or whatever, background.
Read the phone
That
book.
never happens, I want to know.
I wish I could make your talk, Mark. I'm
Yeah.
gonna- I'll
But they
be,
just told me today, so it's
Oh,
not
there
like
you go.
they give me a lot of time.
yeah, I'll be,
And hundreds of
I'll be in
people
the
go.
devil.
Then the next day I get my nose operated.
oh, dude.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Especially when I
TV
open
and
it,
stuff.
I'm like,
I've been what? You ever know people that succeeded? Getting operations, it's supposed to help, because I've
you'll
heard
be
some,
fine. You'll be okay.
I'll be okay.
I've been doing that one for a
I'll be
long
okay.
time.
Kevin Lacombe, he's one of the drivers for the
I'm gonna
city.
be okay.
You're gonna be okay.
So the
I'm sure we'll
Clean
help.
Energy Work Group.
Yeah.
And then you'll
I
be
think
like,
so.
why
really
didn't I do
just
this
being
sooner?
Yeah, why?
Recording's done. And I think we can have up to 3 people.
Kevin Lacombe.
We wanted
who's
to
The what?
Kevin
put the
Lacombe,
band
he's the
together.
city-
you know,
Sure.
people
Driver,
are-
driver, recycling driver.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Who just did.
I don't know if
You just
we'll
added, yeah.
to meet in the next
So usually you didn't appreciate that.
month,
What?
or
Oh, Mark
maybe
and Mark.
just give it over.